The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. Warp fields, subspace variance, the elegant mathematics of faster-than-light travel. For over 2 centuries, the United Federation of Planets had catalogued, classified, and quantified the cosmos with remarkable precision. Captain Jean-Luc Picard had faced anomalies that defied explanation: Q's capricious interference, temporal loops, the cold geometric horror of Borg space. But the Federation always found a framework, a theory, a rational lens through which the impossible became merely improbable. On stardate 44003.7, that framework shattered. The Enterprise D was running a standard patrol along the Romulan neutral zone, 3 light-years from the Devolan system, when Lieutenant Commander Data detected the first readings. Not a ship. Not a natural phenomenon. Something the computer required 4 full seconds to classify. An eternity for a positronic brain capable of 60 trillion operations per second. "Captain," Data said from Ops, his golden eyes narrowing fractionally, "I am detecting a spatial rupture forming off the port bow. The energy signature does not correspond to any known phenomenon in Starfleet's database. It is not a wormhole, not a subspace fold, not a quantum fissure." He paused. "It appears to be something else entirely." Picard rose from the command chair, smoothing his uniform in that habitual gesture that meant his mind was already 3 steps ahead of the room. On screen. The view screen filled with a wound in space itself, not the elegant blue shimmer of a wormhole or the crackling violet of a temporal rift, but something raw and violent, like reality had been torn open by a fist rather than cut with a blade. The edges pulsed with light that existed somewhere between orange and gold, threaded through with geometric patterns that seemed almost intentional. Almost architectural. "Shields up," Picard said quietly. "Yellow alert." Counselor Troy stood from her chair beside him, her dark eyes troubled. "Captain, I'm sensing something. Not one mind. Thousands. Fear, exhaustion, determination. And beneath all of it." She pressed her fingertips together. "Something ancient. Something that doesn't feel entirely human." Before anyone could respond, the rupture expanded, and the UNSC Infinity tore through it like a blade through silk. She was enormous. The Enterprise D was a vessel of grace and purpose, 642 meters of Federation engineering at its finest. What emerged from that wound in space was in another category entirely. 3.2 kilometers of human warship, her hull scorched and pitted from recent combat, her running lights blazing amber for battle stations. She was angular where the Enterprise was curved, brutal where Starfleet design was elegant. A vessel built not for exploration but for war, and wearing that purpose openly in every line of her construction. Energy weapons port-studded her hull like the eyes of something predatory. Massive magnetic accelerator cannons ran the length of her forward section. And her shielding, Worf confirmed it immediately, was active, cycling through frequencies that bore no relationship to any known shield technology. "Red alert," Picard said. The bridge shifted to emergency lighting. "Hailing frequencies." "Frequencies open," Lieutenant Worf confirmed from tactical, though his expression made clear he considered talking to be the secondary option. "Static." Then a burst of encrypted signal that the universal translator took 7 full seconds to partially decode, longer than it had taken with the Temerians, longer than first contact with a dozen non-humanoid species. Whatever language matrix the Infinity operated on was built on military encryption protocols layered over a human linguistic base that had drifted centuries from Federation standard. Then a voice cut through, clipped and professional. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Thomas Lasky. You are in Federation space near the Romulan neutral zone. We are reading your weapons as active. In the interest of preventing an incident, I'm asking you to stand down your combat systems." A pause. Then, Federation of Planets. Another pause, longer. "We're not in the Orion Arm anymore, are we?" It wasn't a question. "Lower your weapons, Captain," Picard said again, and we can begin to answer that together. On the Infinity's bridge, the conversation was simultaneously happening and not happening for the one member of the crew who operated on a different level than the rest. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117 stood at the secondary tactical station, his Mjolnir Gen 2 armor reading the Enterprise with sensors built into his suit that Starfleet's instruments would have needed an hour to understand. His threat assessment was already complete. The smaller vessel was not a threat to the Infinity in any conventional engagement. Its weapons were energy-based, sophisticated, but not on the scale of Mach rounds or Archer salvos. What concerned him wasn't the ship. It was the uniformity of the crew signatures his suit was reading, thousands of life signs aboard the Enterprise representing dozens of species, moving together with the easy familiarity of people who had long ago stopped seeing difference as a reason for suspicion. In his experience, that kind of unity was either very good or very dangerous. Lasky lowered their weapons. Master Chief kept his hand near his BR-85 regardless. If you want to see more characters cross into the Star Trek universe, hit that subscribe button and drop a character name in the comments below. Live long and prosper. The docking negotiations took 47 minutes, a Federation record for first contact protocols, though no one in the room was celebrating. Picard had convened an emergency senior staff meeting in Observation Lounge 1 before any physical meeting took place, standing at the head of the table with his hands clasped behind his back while Data walked the senior staff through what little the Enterprise's sensors had managed to extract from the Infinity's hull profile. The vessel's outer hull composition is a titanium nanocomposite alloy we have no direct analog for, Data reported, his fingers moving across the table's embedded PADD interface with characteristic precision. Her power readings suggest a fusion-based primary drive combined with a secondary energy source we cannot identify. The geometric patterning embedded in her hull plating appears to serve a structural function, but the mathematics underlying it are. He paused, which for Data was the equivalent of a long, troubled silence. Elegant. Remarkably elegant. I would require significantly more time to fully analyze them. Forerunner, Geordi LaForge said from beside him, leaning forward. That's what the translation fragment said, right? Some of their technology incorporates something called Forerunner design. Whatever that means. It means, Troy said carefully, that these people have been living alongside technology they didn't build. Possibly for a very long time. That kind of relationship shapes a culture in ways that aren't always obvious from the outside. Worf had been quiet throughout the briefing, which was rarely a good sign. Captain, their vessel is over 3 kilometers in length. Their weapons ports number in the hundreds. Whatever war they come from, they built this ship to fight it and win it. I recommend we do not allow an armed contingent aboard the Enterprise. Noted, Mr. Worf. Picard turned from the viewport, where the Infinity hung in space like a small dark moon. Absolute, it had become its own kind of silence. Underneath it, something older and harder, not cruelty, but a relationship with violence so long-standing it had ceased to be a choice and become simply a condition of existence. And beneath even that, buried so deep she almost missed it, a profound, carefully unexamined loneliness. Captain Picard. Lasky extended his hand, and Picard shook it with the measured warmth he reserved for moments when diplomacy mattered more than comfort. I'll be honest with you, my crew is scared. We were in the middle of a combat engagement when the slipspace event occurred. We have no idea where we are, and our navigation systems are giving us star charts that don't match anything in our database. You are in the Alpha Quadrant, Picard said, approximately 22 light-years from Earth. He let that land before continuing. Your Earth, I suspect, is not the same Earth we know. But we will work through that together. He turned his gaze to the armored figure. And your companion? Lasky glanced back. Master Chief Petty Officer John 117. He paused, choosing the word carefully. Our most experienced combat specialist. Picard stepped forward and addressed the visor directly, because whatever was behind it deserved to be addressed directly. Master Chief. You're welcome aboard the Enterprise. A beat of silence. Then a voice, low and unhurried, Captain. Not a greeting exactly. An acknowledgement. An assessment. Worf stepped forward instinctively, not aggressively, but the way a large predator steps forward when it recognizes something in its own weight class. The two regarded each other for a moment that the rest of the room held its breath through. Your armor, Worf said finally. It has seen battle. So has yours, Master Chief replied. But we will extend them every courtesy that first contact protocols demand. Dr. Crusher, I want a medical team on standby. Geordi, work with Data to establish a shared technical frequency, something that lets us talk systems without compromising either vessel's security. And I want a security detail at every transporter pad. Discreet, but present. What Picard hadn't mentioned, and what every member of his senior staff understood without being told, was the subtext running beneath every sensor reading, every translated fragment, every tactical assessment. These people were human. Not Federation human, not shaped by 2 centuries of post-scarcity ethics and interspecies diplomacy, but recognizably, undeniably human. And they had arrived from somewhere that had demanded they build a 3-kilometer warship just to survive. The transporter room was tense when the away delegation materialized. Captain Lasky came through first, late 30s, dark-eyed, with the particular quality of stillness that belonged to people who had spent years making decisions that killed people and learned to carry that weight without letting it show. Behind him, 2 officers in matching green-gray combat fatigues. And then, last, the one Troy had felt before she'd seen. A figure in powered armor that filled the transporter pad the way a piece of heavy artillery fills a room, present and purposeful and not quite belonging to the same category as the humans beside it. The Mjolnir armor was olive green and battle-scarred, its surface a record of engagements that made Worf's most decorated warriors look peacefully employed. The visor was gold-mirrored, impenetrable. The figure stood at 2 meters 18 and moved with a precision that wasn't military training alone, it was something built in, something that existed at the level of bone and reflex. Troy kept her expression neutral. The emotional signature from inside that armor was unlike anything she had encountered. Disciplined so. Worf's expression shifted into something that, on a Klingon, passed for deep respect. Picard allowed himself one small, private thought. This was either the beginning of something remarkable, or the beginning of something catastrophic. In his experience, those 2 possibilities were more often the same thing than anyone liked to admit. The guest quarters assigned to Captain Lasky and his delegation were on Deck 8, a comfortable suite that the Enterprise typically reserved for diplomatic envoys. Master Chief had looked at the offered quarters, then positioned himself in the corridor outside Lasky's door instead. No explanation. No apology. Lasky had simply nodded, because after years of working alongside John 117, he understood that the Chief's instincts about positioning were not habits to be argued with. It was Lieutenant Commander Data who came to find him 3 hours later. Master Chief, Data said, approaching the corridor with the particular brand of fearlessness that came not from courage but from a genuine absence of the threat assessment instincts that would have made a human nervous. I wonder if you would consent to a brief examination. Not medical, I am curious about your armor's energy signature. It is interfering with several of the Enterprise's internal sensors in ways I find genuinely fascinating. The gold visor turned toward him. What kind of interference? Your Mjolnir system appears to generate a low-level electromagnetic variance that our internal sensors are interpreting as approximately 11 different simultaneous alerts, none of which correspond to any actual emergency condition. It is, in a word, confusing our ship. Data tilted his head. I mean no offense. A pause. Then Master Chief pushed off the wall and followed Data to the science lab without another word, which Data correctly interpreted as consent. What followed was the most scientifically productive 2 hours the Enterprise's secondary lab had experienced since their encounter with the nanites of Covey's Alpha. Data worked with the focused delight of someone given an extraordinary puzzle, while Master Chief stood at the center of the scanning platform and allowed the examination with the patience of a man accustomed to pre-mission diagnostics. His suit's onboard AI, a next-generation smart AI designated Roland aboard the Infinity, was transmitting low-level telemetry that Data's instruments were catching fragments of, enough to confirm that the Mjolnir system was semi-autonomous in ways that Federation personal armor technology had never approached. "Your shielding system," Data observed, reading his display with both eyebrows elevated, "appears to redistribute kinetic and directed energy impact across the entire suit surface before venting excess as heat. The mathematics are similar in principle to our own deflector technology, but miniaturized by a factor that our engineers would consider theoretically impossible." "It works," Master Chief said. "Indeed it does." Data made 17 simultaneous notes. "May I ask, the Forerunner technology integrated into the Infinity systems. How long has your civilization had access to it?" "Decades. We're still figuring most of it out." Data processed this. "You are using technology whose underlying principles you do not fully understand, in a war for survival, against enemies who wish to destroy you." He paused. "That is either extraordinarily brave or extraordinarily dangerous. Usually both." In the observation lounge 2 decks up, Picard was having a different kind of conversation. Lasky had accepted tea. Not quite Earl Grey, but close enough that he'd wrapped both hands around the cup like a man who hadn't had something warm and uncomplicated in a long time. Commander Riker sat to Picard's left, Troy to his right, and the conversation had moved past the careful diplomatic opening into something more honest. "The Covenant," Lasky was explaining, "are a religious hegemony. Multiple alien species unified under a theology built around Forerunner artifacts. For 30 years they prosecuted a war of extermination against humanity. We were losing." He set the cup down. "Then the flood appeared. A parasite. Consumes and reanimates biomass, spreads like a plague, no negotiation, no reasoning, no stopping it except destroying everything it touches." He paused. "We survived. Barely. The war we were fighting when the slipspace event hit us, that's a remnant faction. Covenant loyalists who refused the ceasefire." Riker leaned forward. "And Master Chief, how central is he to your military strategy?" Lasky looked at him steadily. "He's the reason we're having this conversation instead of being extinct." Troy had been quiet, reading the room rather than contributing to it. Now she spoke carefully. "Captain Lasky. Your crew. They've been at war for a very long time. What do they want most, right now, in this moment?" Lasky was quiet for a beat. "To know there's something worth going back to." The answer settled over the room like a weight. Meanwhile, Worf had done what Worf did when he didn't trust a situation. He had gone to the holodeck and run combat simulations, modeling the Infinity's weapons loadout against Federation defensive configurations. The results had been instructive and deeply unsettling. A vessel of the Infinity's firepower, if hostile, would not be stopped by the Enterprise alone. The Mac cannons alone, electromagnetic projectile weapons that accelerated a 3,000-ton ferromagnetic round to significant fractions of light speed, operated on principles that Federation shields were not specifically calibrated to counter. He filed his tactical report to Picard with a note that was unusually direct even by Klingon standards: "These people are not our enemies. But they are not yet our allies. The distinction matters." What none of them knew yet, what the Infinity's long-range sensors had detected 40 minutes ago and were still verifying before reporting to Lasky, was that they were no longer alone in this region of space. Something had been listening to the slipspace rupture's energy signature from a very great distance. Something that catalogued new biological and technological distinctiveness the way other beings catalogued sunrises. The Borg had heard the door open. The message came through on a frequency that made every Starfleet officer on the bridge go very still. It was not a hail. It was not a warning. It was a declaration, delivered in a flat, layered, multi-voice cadence that Federation personnel spent their entire careers hoping never to hear directed at them personally. We are the Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile. The long-range sensors had confirmed it 6 minutes before Worf announced it. A single Borg cube, bearing 347 Mark 14, distance approximately 4 light-years and closing at warp 9.6. Estimated time to intercept, 41 minutes. More than enough time to panic. Not quite enough time to run. Picard stood at the center of the bridge and did not move for 3 full seconds. Those who knew him well enough, Riker, Troy, Data, recognized what those 3 seconds meant. They were not hesitation. They were the captain performing the internal act of separating Jean-Luc Picard, the man who had been Locatus, from Captain Picard, the officer who needed to command this ship through the next 41 minutes with absolute clarity. Red alert, he said. All hands to battle stations. Mr. Data, get me everything we have on that cube-specific configuration. Mr. Worf, contact the Infinity immediately. Troy touched his arm as he turned toward the command chair. Just briefly. He acknowledged it with the smallest nod and kept moving. On the Infinity, the Borg signal had landed differently. Roland, the ship's AI, had run the Borg through the UNSC's Combined Threat Database in 0.3 seconds and returned a result that Master Chief read from his suit's heads-up display with the focused attention he gave to every new category of enemy. Cybernetic collective consciousness, biological assimilation via nanoprobe injection, adaptive shielding, no centralized command structure to decapitate, estimated drone count per cube between 5 and 10,000. He cross-referenced it against every combat doctrine in his experience and arrived at a conclusion that was professionally honest. The flood had been worse. But not by the margin anyone would find comforting. He was on the bridge of the Enterprise 4 minutes later, having transported over without waiting for an invitation, because the tactical situation did not have room for courtesy delays. Lasky was already on the comm from the Infinity's bridge. Their adaptive shielding is the primary problem, Master Chief said, addressing Picard directly, because the situation had moved past the phase where rank deference between different military structures was a productive use of anyone's time. If your weapons lose effectiveness after the first few hits, you need an alternative. What do you have? Picard looked at him for a moment, not offended, genuinely recalibrating. We have fought the Borg before. Frequency rotation on our phaser banks can extend effectiveness, but you're correct that adaptation is inevitable. He paused. At Wolf 359, we lost 39 ships. The number landed in the room. Master Chief absorbed it the way he absorbed all casualty figures, completely, without flinching, because flinching didn't help the people who were already gone. The Infinity's Mac cannons fire kinetic rounds, he said. Ferromagnetic slugs accelerated to 0.4% light speed. 3,000 tons of mass at that velocity. Your shields are energy-based, theirs will be too. Kinetic impact is a different problem for them to solve. Riker looked at Data. Data's expression confirmed what Riker was already thinking. He's right, Geordi said over the comm from engineering. Kinetic weapons at that scale, their adaptive shielding is designed for directed energy. It doesn't adapt to physical impact the same way. We have never attempted a coordinated engagement with a non-Federation vessel, Worf said, though his tone made clear he found the prospect significantly more interesting than troubling. There's a first time for everything, Lieutenant, Riker said. Picard turned back to Master Chief. The two men regarded each other across a distance of approximately 2 meters and approximately 300 years of divergent human history. One had built a career on the principle that reason and diplomacy were the highest expressions of civilization. The other had spent his entire existence as the embodiment of the proposition that sometimes the only thing standing between civilization and extinction was a soldier willing to do what reason and diplomacy couldn't. I will not fire first, Picard said. The Borg do not negotiate, but Starfleet protocol requires. I know, Master Chief said. You need to try. Try fast. Picard almost smiled. He opened a channel. The Borg did not respond to the hail in any way that constituted dialogue. They accelerated. 23 minutes to intercept. What happened in the next 8 minutes aboard the Enterprise was the kind of controlled, disciplined preparation that Starfleet training existed to produce: stations manned, power rerouted, shield harmonics cycling through randomized frequencies to delay adaptation. On the Infinity, a parallel process was underway at a different scale and a different tempo: Spartan fire teams moving to battle stations, Mac cannons charging, point defense systems coming online with the methodical efficiency of a crew that had done this more times than they could count and intended to do it again. Master Chief stood at the back of the Enterprise bridge and watched Picard work, and in the privacy of his own mind, a place very few people had ever had access to. He made an assessment he rarely made about anyone outside a Spartan company: this man knew how to command. Not just tactically. Fundamentally. The crew moved for him not out of fear or obligation but out of something that looked remarkably like faith. He filed that observation away. Faith in command was either a unit's greatest strength or the exact mechanism of its destruction, depending entirely on whether the commander deserved it. 15 minutes to intercept. The cube appeared on the view screen, and the bridge went quiet with the particular quality of silence that belongs to people who have faced something like this before and are honestly uncertain they will face anything again. The first exchange lasted 90 seconds and rewrote everything both crews thought they understood about the engagement. Picard had coordinated the opening salvo with the precision of someone who had studied Borg tactical responses across a dozen encounters. Phaser banks cycling through 17 frequency rotations in the first 4 seconds, photon torpedoes bracketing the cube's primary power conduit junctions, the Enterprise rolling to present a lower shield profile while maintaining weapons lock. It was textbook. It was excellent. It bought approximately 40 seconds before the cube's adaptive shielding locked the phaser frequencies and rendered them functionally useless. Then the Infinity fired. The Mac round crossed the distance between the two vessels in a fraction of a second, a hypersonic ferromagnetic slug that the Borg sensors almost certainly detected and almost certainly had no adequate response protocol for, because nothing in the collective's accumulated knowledge of the Alpha Quadrant had prepared it for 3,000 tons of mass moving at 0.4% light speed. The impact detonated against the cube's forward facing with a flash that whited out the Enterprise's view screen for 2 full seconds. When the image resolved, a quarter of the cube's forward section was simply gone. The bridge erupted. Not in celebration, in the controlled, professional agitation of people rapidly updating their tactical models. Worf's hands were moving across his console before the flash had fully cleared. Data was already calculating the structural damage assessment. Riker turned to Picard with an expression that said, clearly and without words, "We should have been doing this years ago." Reload time? Picard asked. Lasky says 5 seconds per cannon, Worf reported. They have 4 primary Mac batteries. Tell them to fire at will on the secondary power nodes. Data, identify the optimal impact points for kinetic yield against Borg internal architecture. The message came through on a frequency that made every Starfleet officer on the bridge go very still. It was not a hail. It was not a warning. It was a declaration, delivered in a flat, layered, multi-voice cadence that Federation personnel spent their entire careers hoping never to hear directed at them personally: "We are the Borg. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance is futile." The long-range sensors had confirmed it 6 minutes before Worf announced it: a single Borg cube, bearing 347 Mark 14, distance approximately 4 light-years and closing at warp 9.6. Estimated time to intercept, 41 minutes. More than enough time to panic. Not quite enough time to run. Picard stood at the center of the bridge and did not move for 3 full seconds. Those who knew him well enough, Riker, Troy, Data, recognized what those 3 seconds meant. They were not hesitation. They were the captain performing the internal act of separating Jean-Luc Picard, the man who had been Locatus, from Captain Picard, the officer who needed to command this ship through the next 41 minutes with absolute clarity. "Red alert," he said. "All hands to battle stations. Mr. Data, get me everything we have on that cube-specific configuration. Mr. Worf, contact the Infinity immediately." Troy touched his arm as he turned toward the command chair. Just briefly. He acknowledged it with the smallest nod and kept moving. On the Infinity, the Borg signal had landed differently. Roland, the ship's AI, had run the Borg through the UNSC's Combined Threat Database in 0.3 seconds and returned a result that Master Chief read from his suit's heads-up display with the focused attention he gave to every new category of enemy. Cybernetic collective consciousness, biological assimilation via nanoprobe injection, adaptive shielding, no centralized command structure to decapitate, estimated drone count per cube between 5 and 10,000. He cross-referenced it against every combat doctrine in his experience and arrived at a conclusion that was professionally honest: the flood had been worse. But not by the margin anyone would find comforting. He was on the bridge of the Enterprise 4 minutes later, having transported over without waiting for an invitation, because the tactical situation did not have room for courtesy delays. Lasky was already on the comm from the Infinity's bridge. "Their adaptive shielding is the primary problem," Master Chief said, addressing Picard directly, because the situation had moved past the phase where rank deference between different military structures was a productive use of anyone's time. "If your weapons lose effectiveness after the first few hits, you need an alternative. What do you have?" Picard looked at him for a moment, not offended, genuinely recalibrating. "We have fought the Borg before. Frequency rotation on our phaser banks can extend effectiveness, but you're correct that adaptation is inevitable." He paused. "At Wolf 359, we lost 39 ships." The number landed in the room. Master Chief absorbed it the way he absorbed all casualty figures, completely, without flinching, because flinching didn't help the people who were already gone. "The Infinity's Mac cannons fire kinetic rounds," he said. "Ferromagnetic slugs accelerated to 0.4% light speed. 3,000 tons of mass at that velocity. Your shields are energy-based, theirs will be too. Kinetic impact is a different problem for them to solve." Riker looked at Data. Data's expression confirmed what Riker was already thinking. "He's right," Geordi said over the comm from engineering. "Kinetic weapons at that scale, their adaptive shielding is designed for directed energy. It doesn't adapt to physical impact the same way. We have never attempted a coordinated engagement with a non-Federation vessel," Worf said, though his tone made clear he found the prospect. 45 seconds, Picard said. "Not 1 second more." "Understood." The chief stepped onto the pad. "You'll want to rotate your shield harmonics to pattern 7 while I'm in there. Keeps their cutting beam busy." Then he shimmered and was gone. 45 seconds is a very short time to save 2 ships and a very long time to spend inside a Borg cube alone. Master Chief materialized in a corridor that existed somewhere between architecture and organism, walls that pulsed with dark green bioluminescent circuitry, floors that vibrated with the collective processing of thousands of drones, air thick with the metallic taste of nanoprobe suspension fluid and ozone from active power conduits. His suit sensors mapped the immediate environment in 0.4 seconds and returned a threat assessment that would have been paralyzing to anyone whose threat threshold hadn't been calibrated against the flood. 43 seconds. He moved. The Borg drones in the corridor registered him immediately, 4 of them, turning with the unhurried certainty of beings who had never encountered something they couldn't assimilate. The first reached for him with an assimilation tubule and found its arm removed at the elbow by a single motion that Master Chief performed without breaking stride. The second and third were neutralized with the BR-85 before they completed their threat response. The fourth he simply walked through, because the drone was in his path and stopping was not an option. 38 seconds. His suit's uplink to Roland, still active through a narrowband signal the Borg hadn't identified yet, was feeding him a structural map extrapolated from the Enterprise's sensor data and the Infinity's Borg combat archives, which contained exactly one entry from a deep space encounter 2 years prior that had not ended well for the UNSC vessel involved. The power junction was 3 levels down and approximately 60 meters aft. Between him and it, an indeterminate number of drones and a particular architectural quality of Borg construction that made every corridor look functionally identical. 31 seconds. On the Enterprise bridge, the atmosphere had compressed into something that had no precise name, not panic, not calm, but the specific emotional texture of people doing their jobs with complete precision while a clock ran down on something they could not control. Picard stood at the command chair and directed the engagement with the outward steadiness that his crew needed from him, but Troy, beside him, could feel what it cost. The shield rotation to Pattern 7 had done exactly what Master Chief predicted. The Borg cutting beam had shifted its frequency analysis to the new configuration, buying the Infinity approximately 90 seconds of reduced pressure on their forward shields. Lasky had used those 90 seconds to fire 2 more Mach rounds into the cube's dorsal section, and the structural damage was now significant enough that Data was calculating a 17% chance of cascading failure without any further intervention. 24 seconds. Transport lock? Picard asked. Attempting, Data said. The Borg's internal interference is disrupting our targeting sensors. I have a partial lock on Master Chief's armor signature but cannot achieve full resolution. Keep trying. Captain. Worf's voice had a quality in it that made Picard turn. The cube is launching a secondary tractor emitter. They are attempting to board the Infinity directly. I am reading transport signatures consistent with Borg drone deployment. Picard opened the channel to Lasky immediately. Captain, prepare for drone boarding action. They will target your engineering sections first. Lasky's response was immediate and entirely characteristic of a man who had been fighting desperate boarding actions since before he had any business commanding a starship, already on it. Chief, you have 18 seconds. 18 seconds. Master Chief found the power junction at the 14-second mark. A cathedral-scale chamber at the cube's geometric center where power conduits the diameter of shuttlecraft converged in a lattice of crackling green-white energy. The scale of it was significant even by his standards. He placed the Havoc at the primary convergence point, activated the detonation sequence, and transmitted the confirmation signal to the Enterprise in the same motion. Then he turned to fight his way back and found that the Borg had anticipated him. 12 drones. Blocking the single corridor he'd entered through, moving with the coordinated purpose of a collective that had processed his combat patterns from the previous 4 drones and generated a response protocol. They came in a wave, not the individual assimilation approach of a standard encounter but a mass action, designed to overwhelm through sheer physical contact. 9 seconds. He didn't fight through them. He went over them. Suit thrusters firing in a 3-second burst that took him above the drone formation and over their heads, landing behind the rearmost drone and running for the corridor entrance with the focused velocity of someone who had done the math and knew that 9 seconds left no margin for elegance. 6 seconds. I have a lock, Data announced on the bridge, and his voice carried something that in a human would have been relief. Targeting is unstable. There is a 41% probability of pattern degradation during transport. Energize, Picard said. 4 seconds. The transporter beam found Master Chief at the corridor entrance, mid-stride, and pulled him apart at the molecular level with the Borg cube filling his visor and the detonation timer at 3 seconds. He materialized on the Enterprise transporter pad in pieces of light that resolved with agonizing slowness into solidity. Chief Medical Officer Crusher was in the room. Picard had ordered her there, and she ran her tricorder over him before he had fully finished existing again. 2 seconds. 1. The explosion on the view screen was quiet from this distance, a silent bloom of white light from inside the cube that expanded outward through its hull in a geometric pattern that followed the power conduit network like a blueprint made of fire. The cube's structural integrity failed from the inside out, each section going dark in sequence, the collective consciousness flickering out drone by drone until the last of the green bioluminescence died and left only debris and silence. Master Chief stepped off the transporter pad and looked at Crusher's tricorder reading. Pattern degradation, he asked. 2%, she said. You got lucky. I got beamed back in time, he said. That's not luck. That's your captain. The debris field where the Borg cube had been was still cooling when the Romulan warbirds decloaked. 3 of them, emerging from invisibility with the particular theatrical precision that the Tal Shir favored, not the aggressive decloak of a vessel preparing to fire, but the measured reveal of someone who has been watching long enough to know exactly what they've just witnessed and has decided that patience has paid off sufficiently. They took up a triangulated position around both the Enterprise and the Infinity with the geometric elegance of a trap that had been prepared in advance and was only now being sprung. The lead warbird hailed immediately. Captain Picard. The voice belonged to Commander Torith, a name Picard recognized from intelligence briefings with the particular cold clarity reserved for Tal Shir operatives who had earned their reputations through methods Starfleet preferred not to document in detail. A remarkable engagement. We have been observing from the neutral zone border for some time. The vessel that accompanied you, we would very much like to discuss it. Picard kept his voice level. Commander Torith. You are outside the neutral zone. I'll ask you to withdraw to the established boundary while we conduct. We'll withdraw when we've had a conversation, Torith said pleasantly. A private one. You, me, and representatives of your rather extraordinary guests. Shall we say 1 hour? My ship. I'll send coordinates. The channel closed before Picard could respond, which was itself a message. Master Chief had watched the exchange from the back of the bridge, his suit sensors already running analysis on the 3 warbirds' weapons configurations and shield harmonics. Romulan military technology was not in the UNSC's database, but the tactical geometry was familiar enough. 3 vessels in triangulated formation was a universal language, and it translated to the same thing in every military culture he'd encountered: you are surrounded, and I know what I am, Captain. The question is whether what I am is useful here. That, Picard said, is a more sophisticated question than most people ask about themselves. Commander Torith's briefing room was designed for psychological advantage: low lighting, Romulan ale already poured, seating arranged so that visitors faced a window looking out at the warbird's wings and, beyond them, the Infinity hanging in space like a dark monument. The message of the room was clear. We see everything, we have prepared for this, and you are guests here whether you feel like it or not. Torith herself was exactly what her intelligence file suggested: composed, precise, with the quality of attention that belonged to people who treated every conversation as an interrogation and every silence as data. She looked at Master Chief for a long moment before she spoke. The armor, she said. It's not Federation technology. No, Master Chief said. The weapon you used inside the Borg cube. Also not Federation. Also no. And the vessel you arrived with, 3.2 kilometers, weapons systems our sensors cannot fully characterize, hull technology that our best analysts have been examining for the past 4 hours and cannot explain. She leaned forward. You understand why we're interested. You want it, Master Chief said. You're not getting it. Torith smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had not expected to get it today and was perfectly comfortable playing a longer game. We want to understand it. There's a difference. She turned to Picard. Captain, the Federation has a policy of sharing technology with allies under appropriate treaty frameworks. We're simply asking to be considered in that framework. The Romulans and the Federation are not allies, Picard said carefully. We are neighbors who have maintained a difficult peace. Difficult peace is still peace, Torith said. And what arrived in our shared neighborhood today represents a change in the. We would like you to feel that. They want the Infinity's technology, he said. Almost certainly, Picard agreed. He turned from the view screen. Which means this conversation requires careful handling. The Romulans are not our enemies, but the Tal Shiar operates with agendas that don't always align with the Romulan Senate's official positions. He paused. I will attend the meeting. I would ask you to accompany me. Master Chief considered this for a moment. Why? Because Commander Torith wants to assess what you are, Picard said directly. And I would rather she do that with me present than find another way to do it without me. The shuttle ride to the Romulan warbird was conducted in the specific silence of two people who operated on different frequencies attempting to find a shared one. Picard sat across from Master Chief in the aft passenger compartment, and after approximately 4 minutes of quiet he said, without preamble. You placed a nuclear device inside an enemy vessel and expected to die in the process. It was a tactical option. It was also a choice, Picard said. I'm curious about the man who makes that choice as a first instinct rather than a last resort. The gold visor regarded him steadily. How many people died at Wolf 359? 11,000. How many would have died if someone had made a harder choice earlier? Picard was quiet for a moment. That question is one I have asked myself more than you might imagine. He folded his hands. The difference between us, I think, is not that I don't understand the arithmetic. It's that I believe the arithmetic is not the only consideration. It kept your ship alive today. Yes, Picard said. It did. And I'm grateful for it. I'm also aware that a man who has spent his entire existence as a weapon is not always best positioned to know when to stop being one. The chief was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something that wasn't quite agreement and wasn't quite argument. Strategic landscape that neither of us can afford to navigate separately. She refilled her ale glass with deliberate calm. The Borg just lost a cube. When they send the next one, and they will, would you prefer to face it with 3 warbirds beside you or without them? The silence that followed was the kind that contained an entire argument on both sides. Master Chief broke it. What do you actually want? Torith looked at him with something approaching genuine respect. Access to your vessel's Forerunner database. Read only. Supervised. In exchange for Romulan cloaking technology schematics and our complete intelligence file on Borg spatial movements in the last 6 months. Picard looked at Master Chief. Master Chief looked at Torith. No, he said. But I'll tell you how we killed the cube. That's worth more than database access anyway. The negotiation with Torith lasted 3 hours and produced something that satisfied no one completely, which Picard privately considered the hallmark of a successful diplomatic outcome. Master Chief had outlined the kinetic impact principle behind the Mac cannons in sufficient tactical detail to be genuinely useful without revealing anything about Forerunner technology specifically, and Torith had reciprocated with Borg spatial movement that data subsequently confirmed was authentic and represented approximately 6 months of Tal Shiar deep space intelligence gathering. It was not an alliance. It was not a treaty. It was 2 parties exchanging enough information to be mutually useful while maintaining enough distance to be mutually suspicious, which in the Alpha Quadrant passed for progress. What nobody had accounted for was Lieutenant Commander Tarkin. He was Torith's second officer, young by Romulan standards, with the particular combination of ambition and impatience that the Tal Shiar occasionally produced in officers who had been told they were exceptional for long enough that they had started believing exceptional people were exempt from institutional constraints. While Torith conducted her sanctioned negotiation in the briefing room, Tarkin had been conducting a different kind of operation entirely. 3 Romulan operatives in environmental suits, beamed to the Infinity's secondary hull under cover of the warbird sensor shadow, carrying equipment designed to extract data from systems they didn't understand using methods that could generously be described as invasive. Roland detected them 40 seconds after materialization. The AI's response was immediate and characteristically unambiguous. Internal alert to Captain Lasky, lockdown of the affected sections, and a short tactical summary transmitted to Master Chief's suit on the narrowband channel that remained active across both vessels. The chief read it mid-conversation, his posture unchanging. His attention apparently still on Torith, and then he set his hands flat on the briefing room table and spoke directly to her. "You have 3 people on my ship." The briefing room went very still. Toritha's composure held for approximately 1 second, genuinely impressive, all things considered. Before something shifted behind her eyes that was not quite guilt and not quite calculation but the specific expression of a senior officer who has just discovered that a subordinate has made a decision that is going to cost her significantly. "I was not aware." "Yes you were," Master Chief said. "Not accusatory. Factual. The question is whether you authorized it or whether your second officer is operating independently. Either answer is a problem, but they're different problems." Picard looked at Torith with an expression that managed to convey profound disappointment without raising his voice by a single degree. In its own way it was more withering than anger. "Commander." Torith closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the calculation was complete. "Tarkan acted without my explicit authorization. He will be recalled immediately." She touched her calm. "Tarkan, stand down. Return to the ship. Now." A pause. "We will discuss your career prospects when you're aboard." The 3 operatives beamed back. Lasky confirmed their departure with the clipped professionalism of a man who was furious and had decided that being furious was a luxury the current situation couldn't afford. The data extraction equipment had interfaced with one of the Infinity's secondary systems for approximately 31 seconds before Roland locked them out. Long enough to extract fragments, not long enough to extract anything coherent. Master Chief filed that assessment away with the specific mental notation he reserved for problems that hadn't fully manifested yet. The shuttle back to the Enterprise was quieter than the ride out. Picard sat with his hands folded and looked at the middle distance for a long time before he spoke. She didn't authorize it. No. But she would have used whatever Tarkan brought back. Yes. Picard nodded slowly. "Welcome to diplomacy in the Alpha Quadrant." Master Chief was quiet for a moment. "On my side of the galaxy, the Covenant started as a religious coalition and became an extinction event. The Flood didn't negotiate at all. Compared to that, the Romulans are straightforward." "That might be the most sobering thing anyone has ever said to me," Picard replied. Back aboard the Enterprise, the debrief with the senior staff produced 2 immediate priorities. The first was the Borg spatial movement data from Torith. Data and Geordi spent 4 hours cross-referencing it with existing Starfleet intelligence and produced a navigational assessment that suggested the destroyed cube had been operating as a long-range scout, and that its failure to report would trigger a follow-up response within 72 to 96 hours. Not a fleet, the Borg didn't send fleets to investigate single missing scouts. But likely a second cube, possibly configured differently based on what the first had transmitted before its destruction. The second priority was the slipspace rupture. It had not closed. The Infinity's navigational team, working in collaboration with Data and Lieutenant Commander LaForge across a shared technical frequency that had become remarkably productive given that it required both crews to essentially invent a shared technical language from scratch, had determined that the rupture was stable, not growing, not shrinking, simply persisting at the same spatial coordinates where the Infinity had arrived. More significantly, they had determined that it was not a natural phenomenon. The geometric patterning Forerunner technology exhibited in its energy signature matched the rupture's structural mathematics almost exactly. Something had opened the door deliberately. Master Chief processed this information in Lasky's ready room aboard the Infinity, standing at the viewport looking at the rupture's distant glow while Lasky sat at his desk with the expression of a commander who has just received confirmation that his situation is more complicated than previously assessed. "Someone brought us here," Lasky said. Something, Master Chief replied. The Forerunners have been dead for 100,000 years. Their technology hasn't been. The silence between them carried the weight of everything they both knew about what happened when ancient technology activated without apparent cause. In their experience, it was never a coincidence. It was never benign. And it was never finished with whatever it had started. Lasky looked at him. What do you want to do? Master Chief turned from the viewport. Find out why we're here. Then deal with it. It was, Lasky reflected, the most concise strategic doctrine he had ever heard, and also the most consistently effective one he had ever witnessed in practice. The answer came from an unexpected source, at an unexpected moment, in the way that answers to the largest questions tend to arrive, not through investigation or analysis but through the universe simply deciding it was time. Q materialized on the Enterprise bridge at 0347 hours, wearing a Starfleet admiral's uniform with the particular satisfaction of someone who had chosen the costume specifically to irritate the room's senior occupant. He was sitting in the command chair when Picard arrived on the bridge in response to the red alert that Data had triggered upon detecting an anomalous energy signature consistent with Q continuum manifestation, and he had his feet up on the console with the comfortable proprietorial air of someone who considered the entire galaxy a personal sitting room. Jean-Luc, Q said warmly. You've been busy. Picard stopped at the top of the bridge steps and looked at him with the measured exhaustion of a man who has faced this particular disruption enough times to have developed a specific category of patience for it. Q, remove your feet from my console. In a moment. Q surveyed the bridge with bright, cataloging eyes. I see you've made friends. Interesting friends. Much more interesting than your usual collection of diplomats and scientists. His gaze settled on Master Chief, who had arrived on the bridge 30 seconds after Picard, fully armored, because Master Chief did not respond to red alerts in any other condition. Q tilted his head. Oh. Oh, now that is something. He stood from the command chair and walked toward the Chief with the focused curiosity of a being for whom the entire observable universe was normally a source of mild entertainment and who had just encountered something that was generating genuine interest. Master Chief's suit sensors registered Q's approach and returned a threat assessment that was, for the first time in the Chief's operational history, entirely blank. No biological readings. No energy signature. We're pulled from, I've seen how it ends without intervention. The Infinity doesn't survive it. He looked at Lasky, who had beamed over upon the red alert and was standing at the rear of the bridge processing this exchange with the focused attention of a man encountering a category of entity his entire military career had not prepared him for. You're welcome, Captain. Lasky stared at him. You're saying you saved my ship. I'm saying I gave your ship the opportunity to save itself, Q corrected precisely. There's a philosophical distinction there that Jean-Luc will appreciate. He turned back to Picard. The test wasn't what I expected, I'll admit. I thought your Starfleet principles would clash more dramatically with your new friend's rather more direct approach to problem solving. Instead you've been, he searched for the word, complimentary. Irritatingly complimentary. What was the test? Picard asked. Q was quiet for a moment, which was genuinely unusual. Whether two versions of humanity, one shaped by 2 centuries of peaceful exploration and one shaped by 30 years of existential war, could operate together without destroying each other or what they each stood for. Whether the Federation's principles survive contact with a humanity that never had the luxury of developing them. He looked between Picard and Master Chief. The Continuum had significant disagreement about the outcome. I won the argument. Master Chief had been still throughout this exchange with the patience of someone who had learned that some situations required listening before acting. Now he spoke. The rupture. Can you send us back? Q looked at him with something that was almost respect. Straight to the point. Yes. I can send the Infinity back, to the moment after the engagement, with the outcome changed. The Covenant remnant fleet will be gone. Your crew survives. He paused. The question is whether that's what you want. Consistent with any known technology or natural phenomenon. No mass displacement. No thermal output. The suit's threat evaluation matrix cycled through its full analytical sequence and produced a single word result, unknown. He trusted the blank assessment more than any threat rating. Blank meant outside the parameters of everything the UNSC had ever encountered. That made Q the most dangerous thing in the room by default. You're not going to shoot me, Q said pleasantly, stopping 2 meters away. Your weapons wouldn't do anything interesting, and somewhere underneath all that very impressive armor you know it. He tilted his head the other way. You've fought gods before, haven't you? Not metaphorical gods, actual beings of immense power who claimed divinity and had the capacity to back it up. Master Chief said nothing. And you killed them, Q continued, with something that was almost admiration. Remarkable. Genuinely remarkable. The Continuum has been watching your timeline for some time, you know. The things your civilization has survived, the Covenant, the Flood, the Prometheans, most species faced with any one of those threats simply stops existing. You kept going. He paused. We wanted to see what you'd do here. You opened the rupture, Picard said flatly. Q turned to him with the expression of someone caught in something they're not remotely embarrassed about. The rupture was already forming. A naturally occurring intersection between two-dimensional membranes, genuinely rare, happens perhaps once every 40,000 years in any given region of space. All I did was. He made a small, precise gesture, encourage it. At a specific moment. When the Infinity was in exactly the right position. You pulled them out of a combat engagement, Picard said. People could have died. People were already dying, Q replied, and for a single moment the playfulness dropped and something older and more serious occupied his expression. The engagement day. The bridge was very quiet. There's a condition, Picard said. It wasn't a question. There's always a condition, Q agreed cheerfully. The Borg's second response arrives in 68 hours. Not a scout this time, a tactical cube, fully configured for the specific threat profile your little alliance demonstrated. Your phasers won't touch it. The Romulan warbuds won't survive the opening exchange. Without the Infinity's Mac cannons and Master Chief's rather creative approach to internal demolition, the Federation loses this engagement with consequences that the Continuum considers. He tilted his hand side to side, undesirable. You want us to stay and fight, Lasky said. I want you to choose to stay and fight, Q corrected. Entirely different thing. Free will is rather the point of the exercise. Master Chief turned to Lasky. The two men looked at each other across the accumulated weight of everything they'd been through, their war, their losses, their dead, the particular exhaustion of people who had been fighting so long that peace felt like a foreign language they'd never quite learned to speak. Lasky spoke first. It's your call, Chief. Master Chief turned back to the view screen, where the slipspace rupture glowed at the edge of sensor range like a door left deliberately ajar. Then he turned to Picard. Tell me about the tactical cube, he said. The 68 hours passed with the particular quality of time that exists before large engagements, compressed and elastic simultaneously, each hour feeling both too short and too long depending on which task was consuming it. Picard used the time the way Picard always used time before a confrontation he couldn't avoid, preparation, diplomacy, and the quiet internal work of a man making peace with outcomes he couldn't fully control. He convened 3 joint planning sessions between the Enterprise senior staff and the Infinity's tactical team, and what emerged from those sessions was something neither crew could have produced independently. Starfleet's deep institutional knowledge of Borg behavior, their adaptation patterns, their tactical priorities, the specific vulnerabilities that years of painful engagement had revealed. Combined with the Infinity's raw weapons capacity and the UNSC's combat doctrine experience produced a tactical framework that data assessed as offering a 67% probability of successful engagement outcome. Those were better odds than Wolf 359 had offered by a considerable margin. Master Chief spent the 68 hours differently. He moved between both ships with the methodical purposefulness of someone conducting a pre-combat assessment. Checking Spartan fire team positions, reviewing the Enterprise's internal defense configurations, spending 4 hours in the Infinity's armory overseeing the preparation of every available Havoc warhead with the personal attention he gave to equipment that people's lives depended on. He also spent 2 hours in the Enterprise holodeck, alone, running a simulation of the upcoming engagement that he had programmed himself using the combined sensor data from both vessels. Troy found him there when the simulation had ended, standing in the empty holodeck grid with his helmet off, the first time anyone aboard the Enterprise had seen his face. He was older than most of them had imagined. With the particular quality of age that belongs not to years but to accumulated weight, the face of someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had simply grown strong enough that it no longer showed except in the eyes. "You're worried," she said. "I'm prepared," he replied. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." He looked at her for a moment. "The simulation runs at 63% success rate. Data has 67. The 4% difference is in how we model Borg tactical adaptation speed." He paused. "I model it faster." "Which model do you trust?" "Mine," he said. "Which means we need to be better than the plan." Troy was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" He waited. "When Q offered to send you back, to your war, your timeline, your people, you didn't hesitate. Why?" He was quiet long enough that she thought he wasn't going to answer. "Then, 11,000 people died at Wolf 359. There's another cube coming. If we leave, those people die and we could have prevented it." He picked up his helmet. "That's not a complicated calculation." "No," she said softly. "But it's a profound one." The tactical cube arrived at 0614 hours on the 67th hour, 1 hour ahead of Q's estimate, which Master Chief had anticipated and Data had not. It was larger than the Scout. A geometric mass of dark green metal and cold purpose that filled the Enterprise's view screen with the specific kind of dread that the Borg generated not through aggression but through absolute indifference. They didn't want to destroy you. They wanted to add you. Somehow that was worse. The engagement opened with the coordinated precision of 67 hours of joint planning, and for the first 4 minutes it held. The Enterprise and the 3 Romulan warbuds. Toreth had honored her informal commitment, appearing at the designated coordinates 90 minutes. Before engagement with the particular Romulan quality of keeping agreements while making clear they were doing so on their own terms. Executed a rolling defensive pattern that kept the cube's cutting beams cycling through frequency adaptations while the Infinity positioned for Mach fire from the cube's ventral aspect where Data had identified a structural density variance suggesting a power distribution node of significant importance. The first Mach salvo hit perfectly. The second hit perfectly. The third was intercepted. The Borg had adapted, not to the kinetic impact, which remained as physically intractable as Newtonian mechanics demanded, but to the Infinity's targeting pattern. A force-field of dense metallic debris, ejected from the cube's damaged sections, created enough mass interference to deflect the third round by 11 degrees, enough to miss the critical node by 40 meters. "They learn," Lasky said on the command channel. "So do we," Master Chief replied, and was already moving. What followed in the next 22 minutes was the most unconventional Borg engagement in Federation history, and it worked precisely because it refused to be conventional. Master Chief led a 4-Spartan team in a series of rapid transporter insertions. In, plant, out, detonate, rotating insertion points faster than the Borg's internal response protocols could track, each detonation targeted not at maximum structural damage but at the specific power conduit junctions that Data had mapped as the cube's adaptation processing nodes. Destroy the adaptation infrastructure and the cube's greatest tactical advantage became a liability, all that processing power devoted to frequency analysis suddenly had nothing to analyze. The Enterprise's phasers began hitting clean on the 14th minute. The Romulan warbugs. Operating in the coordinated pattern Picard had negotiated with Torith, maintained enough pressure on the cube's dorsal section to prevent it from rotating its least damaged facing toward the Infinity. Worf ran the tactical board with the focused ferocity of a Klingon warrior who had found the perfect synthesis of honor and effectiveness, and the Enterprise moved through the engagement with a grace that made even the Infinity's tactical officers pause to watch. On the 22nd minute, the cube's central nexus lost power. It didn't explode. It simply went dark, section by section, the green bioluminescence dying in sequence, thousands of drones losing the collective signal simultaneously and dropping where they stood across hundreds of decks. The most feared weapon in the Delta Quadrant became, in the space of 40 seconds, a very large piece of debris. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then Worf said, with quiet and absolute conviction, "Today was a good day." The slip space rupture was still open when the debris finished cooling. Q had not reappeared, which Picard interpreted as the closest thing to a compliment the entity was capable of offering. The joint debrief between both crews lasted 6 hours and produced a tactical document that Picard intended to submit to Starfleet Command under the most restricted classification available. Not because the information was dangerous, but because some lessons needed to be understood before they were distributed. Master Chief found him on the observation deck afterward, looking at the stars with the particular quality of attention that meant he was thinking about something that couldn't be resolved by thinking about it. "The rupture," the chief said. "Yes. It'll close when we go through." "Data believes so." "Yes." Master Chief was quiet for a moment. Outside, the Infinity hung in space beside them, enormous and battered and somehow more beautiful for both qualities. "Your Federation," he said. "The principles it's built on. Diplomacy first. Non-interference. The belief that reason is the highest tool available." He paused. "It works here because you've had the time and the safety to build it. We never had that." Picard turned to look at him. "Do you think it's wrong? What we've built?" "No," Master Chief said. "I think it's what we were fighting for, on our side, whether we knew it or not." He looked out at the stars. "Worth protecting." Picard was quiet for a long moment. "For what it's worth, what you are, John. What you were made into, what you've carried. The Federation has never produced anyone like you. I'm not certain whether that's something to be proud of or something to grieve." "Both," Master Chief said. "It's always both." He put his helmet on. Below them, the Infinity was already beginning pre-departure procedures, her system cycling up with the deep harmonic vibration that Forerunner hybrid drives produced at full power. Lasky's voice came over the channel, calm, professional, with the particular undercurrent of a man who was going home and had not been certain he would. "Chief. We're ready." Master Chief looked at Picard one final time. The captain extended his hand. The chief took it. "Live long and prosper," Picard said. A beat of silence. Then, "Finish what you started, Captain. Don't let them take it from you." He walked to the transporter pad and didn't look back, because looking back was not something John 117 had ever learned to do, and starting now seemed like the wrong time to begin. The slip space rupture accepted the Infinity the way a wound accepts a suture, cleanly, with the immediate quality of something being resolved. The geometric light collapsed behind her in a sequence that Data recorded in full and spent the next 3 weeks attempting to mathematically reconstruct, with only partial success. The Enterprise held position until the last trace of the rupture's energy signature had dissipated into the background radiation of normal space. On the bridge, no one spoke for a full minute. Then Riker looked at Picard and said, with the quiet sincerity of a first officer who had seen a great deal and knew what mattered, "Hell of a crew." Picard looked at the empty space where the rupture had been, where two versions of humanity had briefly, imperfectly, and remarkably found a way to stand together against something neither could have faced alone. He thought about what Master Chief had said on the observation deck. Worth protecting. 3 words that contained everything the Federation had ever aspired to be and everything it sometimes forgot it was fighting for. Set a course for Starbase 74, he said. We have a report to file. He paused. And Mr. Data, seal the tactical document under my personal authorization code. What we learned here belongs to the people who need it most. Somewhere on the other side of a closed door in space, a Spartan and his ship were going home to a war that would eventually end, because the people fighting it had decided, somewhere in the long terrible years of it, that some things were worth protecting. The Federation didn't know that story, and might never know it. But for 68 hours, 2 versions of humanity had shown each other what they were each capable of at their best. That, Picard decided, was worth every complicated minute of it. Live long and prosper. More stories await.